Hey YouTube, it's the test lead, and today is part 1 of the Vernon Scott interview. You can watch part 2 and part 3 after this. It will be linked below in the description box. If you would like to share your QA software testing experiences, please email me at thetestinglead@gmail.com. And remember, if you find this video helpful at all, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to learn something new today. Now back to the video. All right, so first off, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to do this interview and share your QA experiences and your bootcamp experiences. But to start them out, can you tell them your name and where you're located at, please?
Sure. My name is Vernons Scott. I'm located in Detroit, Michigan, and I was born and raised here.
So before you joined the QA field, what was your background career-wise?
Before QA, I had a background in retail sales. I started off working at GameStop in the early 2000s because I love video games. It transferred to selling hats because I had a ridiculous hat collection. Just working at retail shops that reflected the interest that I had at that point in time. It started to get a little more professional when cell phones started to get way more popular. Like in the late 2010s, I switched over to working at AT&T, and that was my last retail job. So I was fixing the software on phones, troubleshooting a lot of issues for people. And I ended up coming across a gentleman, and I ended up fixing his phone. He had a small minor issue, but it was a brand new phone. It was like the brand new iPhone. It had to be like the iPhone 10, the iPhone X at the time. I fixed it way too fast, and he was like, "Wait, what just happened?" And I explained it to him, and he was like, "If you can fix it that fast and explain it that fast, that means you have mastered this. What are you still doing here?" And I was like, "It's a job. It pays good. Selling cell phones back in 2014 wasn't a bad job. Like I was making over 50K, easy over 50K. So I just told him that I got comfortable, fixing the phones. And he asked me, what did I really want to do? And I was like, well, I would love to learn how to, make apps for phones. And he told me about a boot camp that happens in downtown Detroit. It's located in downtown Detroit called Grand Circus. And at Grand Circus, you learn how to code. I just so happened to apply to that boot camp, and not only apply to the boot camp, I applied for a developed admitting scholarship, which was a tuition reimbursement of the boot camp. They gave it away to two people, one in Detroit, Michigan, and one in Grand Rapids, because they have another boot camp in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And it was in honor of their 50th boot camp. And I ended up getting that scholarship. So all of the stars aligned perfectly at one time, and I was able to take the boot camp, and that was about 6 years ago now.
So let's slow it down.
Yeah. We can break it down. We can break it down.
Okay. So you did cell phone sales, did retail jobs, and then you met this mystery guy one day, and then you fixed his phone, which was a blessing in disguise. Because I think you need to pivot out of sales and into something else now. And then he mentioned the boot camp. But how did you first find the boot camp?
He mentioned the boot camp to me. I didn't know anything about it. He heard about it through one of his colleagues at work. And he said that his nephew took it, or some relative. He was like, it's a pretty good boot camp. 6 years ago, boot camps were the new emerging thing. So it wasn't a lot of information out there for it. But luckily, since it was in downtown Detroit, I decided to go visit myself and talk to him and go through they had info sessions. Mm-hmm. So I looked them up. They had a website. They talked about how you can learn how to code in 3 months. My parents were military vets. So when I see the word boot camp and I see a short amount of time and I'm like, oh no, that is really like an actual boot camp. So I'm like, this might be something I can do. It's super quick. I don't have a degree. That's one thing that I do want to point out. I have no degree of any nature right now. I only have the boot camp right now under my belt and one certification, but no degree. I didn't want to go back to school in the middle of retail. For anybody that has ever worked retail, you know that you work crazy hectic hours. Your schedule from one week to the next is never the same. So school is kind of out of the question at that point in time because you're sacrificing yourself to try to make optimal sales. So you got to be available, to make those. So I was like, this is a good alternative to school to not do 2 years in this. And it also gave me a glimpse into it. Like, okay, I can spend 3 months of my life on this. And if I don't like it, or if I don't succeed, I didn't waste a lot of time. Being older at that point in time, I was 29 when I found out all about this. Time was starting to become of the essence, right up against 30.
Yeah.
You're like, whatever I'm doing, this is probably what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. You start to feel like you need to make some life changes. So I was like, if time is of the essence, I can try this. And I knew I was going to make it work, but I was like, if it doesn't succeed on a practical level, I can go right back to sales and nothing changes.
So the things with boot camps and schooling in general, where you have to make a time commitment and financial commitment. And with boot camps is a lot shorter, with school is a lot longer, but you're sacrificing money and working hours in retail. So what's your final thoughts before saying, okay, I'm gonna take my time and dedicate it towards this boot camp?
I would have to say when I received that scholarship, because before I got the scholarship, I applied to the boot camp and I got accepted. At that point in time, boot camps were probably at their cheapest because they were still in the experimental phase, but they still weren't cheap. That boot camp still ran about 10 grand. I would say 10 grand, 11 grand. And that's a lot of money, especially growing up in Detroit. I'm like, I don't have 10 grand and I'm not about to go pick out a loan for 10 grand because then that means I could have went back to school. So the cost averaging out, I had that doubt. I'm like, dude, I can't. 10 grand over 3 months or 10 grand over 2 years for an associate's degree.
Yeah.
Not even 10 grand over 2 years for an associate's degree. I really had to choose between. So getting the scholarship, going through the interview for the scholarship, I really sold myself. And it wasn't even really selling myself. I was telling the truth. They asked one question at the end of the interview, and they asked, if you do not get this scholarship, how will you still, how will you do with the boot camp? Would you still take this boot camp? And I told him, and I meant it from the bottom of my heart, I was like, if I do not get this scholarship, I will still find a way to take this boot camp. Because at that point, I had to lay everything on the line. Like that $10,000 from them was integral, was important. I needed it. But even if I didn't get it from them, at some point I'm like, this is an opportunity. This is a shot. And I've been riding with it. So I'm going to put everything on the line. And I told him, I was like, some way, somehow, I'm going to find a way to take this boot camp. I may not get the $10,000. I may not get it from you guys. I may not get the scholarship. I may not find it, tomorrow. I may not be in this boot camp this year, but I will find a way to go through this boot camp and graduate from it. And that moves some souls. That moves some souls in the room. Apparently, a gentleman that worked there, a Black guy, and I'll keep him anonymous. And if he ever sees this, he'll know exactly who he is. And 1,000 thank yous to him. After that interview, he called me personally and he said, one, I want to tell you that this phone call never happened. And we all know what that means. Whatever was said between us at that point in time need not to be repeated. So I will paraphrase. He wanted me to make sure that I followed up the professional way you're supposed to follow up after any interview, to ensure that I put that, that final little seal on everything else that I achieved, that I did. He was like, you rock some people with that. It got notoriety from the CEO of Grand Circuits at the time. So I ended up getting that. Needless to say, I got the scholarship. And once I got it, that was all systems go. That I knew at that point in time, I didn't have to worry about finance. And the only thing I had to worry about was learning how to code.
You had your movie picture moment where you made the whole audience cry and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got the miracle call. Okay, we want you. Here's the scholarship. Cool. Now you're starting the boot camp. What was the hardest parts in the beginning, middle, and end of the boot camp?
Oh man, in the beginning of the boot camp, you don't know your computer until you know how to code. Just having to, like get started with coding means you have to install a lot of stuff like IDEs, you have to JVMs, you know, you got virtual machines, you got a language, you got websites that you have to log into. And I had a MacBook. I didn't have a PC.
Yeah.
And for people that don't understand, MacBook is very, very not customizable software wise.
To say the least, yes.
Yeah, MacBooks, you need like a plug-in for almost everything if you're gonna learn how to code. It was just being the overwhelming amount of information. I was being water hosed with information. And I got overwhelmed with processing it. I'm always a little anxious when I start something new because I always have a huge fear of failure, because you see people fail at stuff and you're like, oh crap, like, and they never recover, and you're like, oh crap, I don't want that to be me. And so my anxiety took over in the beginning. So I got overwhelmed. It was tough processing all of the information. So I almost started to shut down a little bit. In the middle, after facing the shutdowns and starting to take the problems head on and starting to get the hang of it, like around week 3, or maybe like I would say probably about week 5 or 6, honestly. At that point, it was time management. Because at that point, we were learning the theory of code from like 9 a.m. to noon. You go to lunch, and then after lunch, you're actually coding. So, if you didn't fully understand the lesson that day, you were probably going back right after lunch, going through the lesson when you were supposed to be coding. Me, I wouldn't understand stuff from 2 days ago. So now I'm going back to stuff 2 days ago. I'm missing the day in between. I haven't coded stuff. So it was very patchy for me in the middle of it. And I'm like, man, I gotta get this together, because no matter how much you read until you start punching those keys, you're not gonna progress forward. You can't theory write code. I mean, you can, but trust me, any developer can tell the difference between somebody that has never written code but theorized it and went through 4 years of college for it versus somebody that's actually sat down and wrote code and had to deploy it and stuff like that. You can tell the difference. It's not a big it's not hard to see. So for me at that point in time, I was really learning how to just understand what bare essentials I needed from what we learned in the morning. Like, just take the bare principles. And then in the afternoon, you got to just apply it. And it was the repetition that started to get annoying, because if you ran into one problem, it's more than one way to solve a problem with coding. So I would hop from not solving a problem to going to find another solution in the early stages, which is early stages of coding. Like, you might see a problem and be like, and then you'll go to Stack Overflow and you'd be like, this person is smarter than me. They got a better solution. I'm going to use this. That's where I was at the middle. At the end, I dealt with imposter syndrome. So towards the end of the boot camp, you kind of you take the pedal off of learning theory in the morning, and you're starting to try to build a portfolio, learning how to curate your resume, learning how to network, talking to people. They were bringing graduates back that worked at different companies within the area. They would bring them back and have them talk to us in the morning and answer questions for us. So my imposter syndrome started to kick in, because in retail, I never had to rely on the network. It was always, I have a sales history. And then in every interview, we would talk about how you sold in your past job, and, oh, sell me something right now. So it was very upfront. Like I didn't have to go after any, I didn't have to talk to a certain person. That's how I made it all the way up to AT&T. It was just this track record of having sales and improving in sales and reflecting upon that. With this, I was brand new. There was no network. I didn't know any other sales people. I mean, any other tech people like that. Some of these people came equipped with networks coming into that boot camp. Some of them already graduated college. Some of them came to that boot camp because their job sent them there. And you found out this, like, in the boot camp, that everybody doesn't start off at the same level. So, that anxiousness that I had in the beginning, that partially attributed to it. But it really fully formed an imposter syndrome later on, because I'm like, I came to this whole party with no gifts. I'm not dressed up. I thought we was just hanging out, and it's more so like, no, this is a professional black tie affair, and it's like, oh, I am underprepared and ill-equipped. So at the end of the boot camp, I didn't get a job like right out of the boot camp. It took some time. So that imposter syndrome hit hard for a while, even after the boot camp.
Quick break. If you're enjoying the video so far, please leave a like so I know you like this type of content. Also, please subscribe to my free email list on my website. I plan to come out with some courses as well as books very soon, and I want you to be the first to know. By subscribing for free, you'll get a notification when those are coming out. Now back to the video.
So let's touch on a few things that you just spoke about. First, in the beginning, how it was overwhelming, all the new like terminology and concepts. Do you have any tips for people who are watching on how to like help get over that problem, or any like things they could try to do?
Immersion. So one of the things that I've learned is immerse yourself. I found some really creative ways to do it. If you're unfamiliar with tech, start by watching tech shows like Silicon Valley, all of those shows where they talk about the daily life of people in tech. You'll start to hear the lingo in like normal conversations. That level, like that shallow level of immersion, no, it's not real, but they also have to speak to some level of realness in that show. Or you're going to have a bunch of developers writing to Silicon Valley, like, hey, this is crap. None of this is factually true. So, like looking back, I realized that like immersing yourself into like the culture of tech, get exposed early on, talk to people, go on LinkedIn and, reach out to people for the boot camps, find graduates before you even take the boot camp, when you're thinking about taking that boot camp. You have to immerse yourself, because if you don't, you won't become adapted to it, because you are essentially changing yourself. Once you make this leap into tech like this, and you put like 40 hours a week in for 90 days, you change as a human being. Your brain changes. So you have to immerse yourself into that stuff, because if you try to do it alone, you will feel weird. You will notice all of the changes. Where if you immerse yourself and you have it in your everyday life, like you're watching YouTube videos about what are some of the things that you heard so far before you even take the boot camp. Like, what is a virtual machine? What is Java? Why does MacBook never have any of the customizations that you need to just code? Like, looking into stuff like that. All of those questions go right into the search bar on Google, right into the search bar on YouTube. Start immersing yourself. That is the biggest piece of advice I can give in the beginning.
Now I was laughing because I just started watching Silicon Valley this year. I have a bunch of coworkers always read like, yo, see Silicon Valley, and I'm like, it's an older show. But I finally watched it this year. I'm like, it feels good to have something I can actually relate to, because you have all these rival shows that are about like drama and stuff like that, but it's nothing like techie or anything like that. So on a regular basis, once you leave your regular job, you exit that world.
Yeah, you kind of walk away from it. And when you're learning at this pace, because you're kind of learning at an accelerated rate. So for people that don't know, boot camps are supposed to be the equivalent of a 2-year associate's degree, crammed into 3 months. That's a lot of, stripping down stuff that you get in school. And the reason why school is so long is so you can immerse yourself slowly. Like how people will use the stairs to walk into a pool. That's a slow immersion. A boot camp is somebody your cousin pushing you when you was trying to read the sign and see how deep the side was. You just got pushed into the deep end, and it's a sink or swim thing, kind of. But I don't want to say, because that instills some level of fear into people, like, oh, so I'm gonna drown in this. And it's like, no. It's just that you get hit with a lot of information and it's built upon very quickly. And you got to be able to absorb it, and you have to immerse yourself in it at that point. So you might as well start with a good show so you can have something to laugh at, because it's going to be some trials and tribulations when you go through a boot camp.
And that's the thing, because I went the traditional university route, but even like that, I felt so lost because I played basketball in my college. So all my regular friends were basketball people. Then I did my coding classes, stuff like that. But outside of class, I had no one to relate to.
Right.
And then I'll have problems with my code. I'm like, I'm not friends with anybody in my class. Who can I even go to for help? So if you are like a boot camp, network with your friends in your classes, make connections, because they can help you go through a lot of things.
Oh yeah, way more things. I got a story for that one too. A little later, I know you're gonna ask that question.
And even then, because I even had classmates, even like in my regular job, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I built a computer at like 8," and I'm like, "You did what?" It's like, "Yeah, I got some parts, I ordered it and put it together." I'm like, I didn't have my own personal laptop until my junior year of college. That's supposed to be laptop to be in a physical room.
Yeah,
it was a big laptop, a big bulky laptop. Before that, I was just in a computer lab. Cool.
That 15-pound boy when 15-pound laptops wasn't cool. Yeah, I know.
And it had a loud fan, so I had to sit in the back so I don't get hit my fan and complain about it. It was just terrible.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you still experience that in a boot camp. Like, usually when you develop friendships in school is based on other interests, and then you guys kind of go down similar pathways because based on interest. When you break away from your friend's interest and you're like, oh, well, I want to do this, especially with technology being relatively new to society, period. Like, this is new. I'm not going to say we're the first generation. We're like the second or third generation, which means like that first generation were the elite of the elite of the elite, the ones that, were math wizards, and they built the foundation. And you had the second generation of people that were like, okay, we can build upon all of these math wizard stuff by adding functions and extensions and stuff. And here we're the generation that wears hoodies and hats, and we're like, we've been playing with computers since we were like 14. We don't know all of the deep functions, but all of that cool stuff that you want to see on the screen, we know how to make that go. Yeah. We know how to navigate the internet, not just the computer. We know how to navigate the internet. So now we're on like a fourth generation where we do business through the internet, high level amounts of business, where we're on the edge of the fifth generation, where now the internet controls our currency. So the stuff that we were immersed into when we were kids, stuff that we played with, is what we're picking up as a profession now. But now you're seeing the dysphoria between an inner city kid that, was on Facebook when you had to get an email invite and tagged in Black Planet, versus the kids that built the computers, that are now like, oh yeah, I built computers, so now I know all of the hardware parts, and I know how the motherboard works, and I know all this other stuff. Now I'm just learning the code part of it so I can be more well-rounded. And it's like, wow, I just stepped into this. So you see different levels, and it gets scary. It gets real scary, because some of these people, you're like, How did you not go to MIT on a full scholarship?
Exactly. Like going back to imposter syndrome, like because when I was a kid, I played sports and stuff. Like
Right.
that was my fun. Their fun was, hey, I'm gonna read this book on computers. I'm like, so they had a head start in the field, but that just motivated me to work extra hard to catch up to where they were. So I want to be in the
Absolutely.
same room as them and speak comfortably. Because at first it can be very
Yeah.
intimidating. And like, I don't want to sound stupid, but once you have that confidence, it's a different story.
Yeah.
And that's the other part where a lot of companies, you'll see someone that's very smart, but they can't switch to the team because they just feel like they're above people. And that's why even when hiring managers are deciding, hey, should I take this really smart person, but he's not a team player, or this person that is a little lower education wise, but works well as a team, let's go with the other person because the team will build around him instead of that person dragging the team down and being cancerous. So that's another tip for you guys.
Yeah. That, man, highlight it. Make it a clip, make it a short, put it out, because that is hyper important.
Because honestly speaking, I know there's been job interviews where I was able to talk myself into the job because they felt the charisma, the personality, like, oh, he's just not a person who's just going to code away. He has actually, he can communicate properly with other people. And that's
Yeah.
important in the real world.
And the adaptability that you have when you're new is valuable. Never short sell yourself, because the eagerness to learn means that you're willing to learn just about anything. And these companies don't all work the same way with technology. They all don't use the same methodologies. They don't all follow the same practices. They all don't use the same products and services to make their technology work. So they want you to learn their specific way, if they have a specific way. So new people are great because you're new to the company. You're going to learn everything about the company as you're learning their technology. You're a great value. It's like getting a rookie. It's like getting a rookie that wants to be on your team. He's like, I wanted to be on this team since I was a kid. And he's actually good. And he's actually good. And it's like, oh crap, he's gonna learn basketball here for like the next 10 years. He doesn't want to go anywhere. We don't have to worry about the money. He'll take pay cuts. He just want to play for this team. And that's valuable. People love when they can build with you, because not only are you malleable to what they have going on, as you learn, you help establish rules and processes. So 2 years from now, you started off as an associate, but from 2 years from now, you might be a senior because you worked there for 2 years. Imagine all of the domain knowledge that you take, especially for people that want to take boot camps. You learn how to code in 3 months. Imagine what you can learn in 2 years. Companies look at that.
And that's the difference between like traditional university and boot camps, where boot camps are teaching you a skill for the job. With universities, I felt a lot of times where you memorize something for the test and then that's it.
Yeah, you have to cover whatever. You have to cover what's ever in the books that they have to buy from the professors, that they have to sell to you. So when that professor puts those 2 paragraphs in a book that you bought 2 years ago, but now it's a brand new version, that has to be covered on the test so they can validate the reason for you to spend $850 on that new version of that book. I know this is probably not going to make the part.
No,
but
it's
that's the honest truth. Yeah, it's the truth.
And then because
it's just,
they both have their pros and cons. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. They both have their pros and cons. I would like to say it's like building a car. So when you're in the boot camp, it's like when you get that first car, if you have a mechanic dad, he's like, I'm not going to give you a working car. You're going to make the car work.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to get a working piece of, you're not going to get something that's working, but with you building it and your eagerness to make it work, you're going to have the skills that's going to make you way more valuable. to repairing your car versus somebody that has a nice little decent job or their parents are loaded and they're like, oh, we're just gonna go to the lot and pick you out a car. Okay, you both now when you both get on the road, people both see drivers. You're both driving cars. And it's great, but this person might have a little more assistance because they can take that car back to the lot. But you have more intuition and know-how and know how to troubleshoot your own problems because you're the one that's fixing your own car. Does it take more of your time and money? Absolutely. But you learned all of the basics to do it yourself versus somebody that can go back to the dealership and pay somebody. Or they have a network now that they can not just take it to that dealership, they can take it to the chain of dealerships. You know, that's how I look at it when you compare it. Boot camps are like, yo, I learned how to build cars from the ground up, you know, at a younger age or whatever age, versus somebody that's like, oh, I only lease vehicles. I know how to get in it and get out of it and tell you when it's broke, but I don't know too much past that. It gets done and it's taken care of, but it's functioning and working.
And the whole thing is honestly getting your foot in the door. Because once you have your foot in the door,
nothing matters.
The next job won't care where you got your education from, just can you do the job or not?
Yeah, and that's it. Once you're in the company, can you do the job or not? And it doesn't even necessarily mean can you do the job. Some people in tech are very social and networking, and they play very political roles. So that's another topic for another interview. Essentially, when you get into these jobs, like I said before, the company has a certain way they want to do stuff. Your degree is now just a tool to show it. It was a tool to get you in the door to say, hey, I've spent 4 years of my life, you know, dedicating myself to the theory and practice of this. And it's like, okay, they're taking that as proof of purchase of your matriculation into that level of training. The boot camp is, yo, I had 3 months and a good amount of money and I slammed my head against it, but I'm here. And it's like, you know what? You went through those 3 months and you got a working website and you showed it to me. Hey, it's the same thing. You showed me working code. I can't deny that.
Yeah.
So now you both got your foot in the door. Now the pedal is to the floor, and this is why boot camps became popular. Boot camps show you something that you don't kind of go through in universities. Is deploying a website from the code base to the internet. Like all in a short amount of time. Like usually when I talk to people that got degrees, they said that they did it in bits and pieces, and like in their final year they built a website, and it was a very, very, very basic website where a lot of people for their final projects for boot camps were ideas that they had, and some people sold to other companies like, oh, well, I saw that this company didn't take this idea. Had this problem. So I came up with a website solution for it. Implementing like IBM, Watson, and stuff like that, API protocols, like heavy level stuff that you normally wouldn't see in a senior level project from somebody graduating from the university. Because it's only when you're graduating from the university, you're presenting your project to a teacher. We all know how that goes. You're gonna make it good enough. There are very few that's gonna make it like out of this world. Most people are just trying to get the grade. In the boot camp, when you build that final project, it's so you can get your first job. That's money on the line. So you have to put your best foot forward. It's a real sink or swim situation. So between those two, once you get there, you got to be able to follow the process from implementation all the way to, we see it on the customer facing website and it's working. You got to be comfortable going through that whole process, that whole software development life cycle. Yeah.
So you talked about the struggles of the boot camp. What was your favorite part of the boot camp? Let's be positive.